Right now, you are using the exact same brain circuitry to plan a complex, multi-decade career path as your ancient ancestors used to evaluate whether a shadow in the tall grass was, a hungry predator or just a trick of the wind.
And honestly, it is completely ruining your life.
It really is. I mean, think about it. You are standing at a massive crossroads. Maybe you're staring down this terrifying career pivot, or maybe you're considering uprooting your family.
Or maybe you are just looking at your life and realizing you did everything society told you to do, and you feel totally empty.
Yeah, exactly. You have options. Like you have a mountain of choices, yet you are utterly paralyzed. And the most isolating part is that you are surrounded by people giving you advice, but you feel completely alone.
Right, because none of their generic platitudes apply to the incredibly specific, nuanced reality of your life.
Spot on. So what we're looking at today is this defining paradox of modern success.
Yeah. We have engineered these environments of infinite choice, but we are navigating them using cognitive hardware that was explicitly designed to handle binary immediate threats.
Fight or flight.
Eat or be eaten. When you apply that prehistoric binary machinery to a complex multivariable question like, how do I restructure my life for long-term fulfillment without going bankrupt? The system just overloads. The machinery literally freezes up.
So we need to completely overhaul the way we approach these massive crossroads. Our mission for this exploration today is to help you reclaim your agency.
Totally.
We are going to scrutinize the material sitting in front of us, merging two fascinating concepts. First, the harsh analytical science of how human neurobiology actually processes choice.
And second, the strategic, highly intentional art of constructing a specialized human network.
Right. We are moving away from the idea that life choices are agonizing riddles you have to solve alone in a dark room. Instead, we're going to look at how to architect your path with the ruthless clarity of a strategist.
But to do that, we have to start by opening up the hood and looking at the engine.
Exactly. Why, on a biological level, do our brains betray us the moment we need them most?
Well, to understand that betrayal, we really have to recognize that we do not have a single unified mind. The psychological research we're analyzing today maps out a fundamental reality about human cognition.
Which is wild when you first read it.
It is. We operate using two entirely distinct parallel systems of thinking. There is the fast automatic system, and there's the slow deliberate system.
Yeah.
And they are in this constant invisible war for control of your behavior.
Okay, let's break down the mechanics of that war, because this is the root of the inner tug of war everyone listening to this has felt. I mean, I've definitely felt it.
Oh, absolutely. We all have.
You know that feeling when your gut screams one thing, but your spreadsheet tells you another? That's the bad right there.
Precisely. So the fast thinking system is your default setting. It is highly emotional, fiercely reactive, and operates almost entirely below the level of conscious awareness.
Like when you hear a sudden loud noise and immediately flinch.
Yes. Or when you walk into a room and instantly dislike someone without knowing why. That is your fast system working. It relies on heuristics, these mental shortcuts, to process information instantaneously.
Right.
The slow thinking system, by contrast, is reflective. It is the part of you that handles complex algebra, analyzes long-term probabilities, and constructs abstract plans for the future.
But the defining characteristic of the slow system isn't just its logic, right? It's the cost.
Exactly. It's extreme metabolic cost.
Meaning it literally burns more energy, it makes you physically tired.
Yes, engaging the slow, analytical part of your brain requires a massive amount of caloric energy. It is exhausting work. And evolutionary biology dictates that an organism must conserve energy at all costs to survive.
So the brain is just lazy.
Inherently lazy by design.
Yeah.
It will relentlessly default to the fast emotional system simply to save calories. This is especially pronounced during adolescence, when the brain is still developing its regulatory centers. But it remains incredibly true for adults.
Especially when we're stressed out.
Right. When you are stressed, when you are sleep deprived, or when you are staring down a major, terrifying life choice, your brain refuses to spend the energy required for slow analysis. It panics and hands the wheel over to the fast system.
Okay, I have to challenge that narrative slightly because society constantly glorifies the fast system.
It really does.
We are constantly bombarded with mantras like, trust your gut or go with your instinct. If the slow analytical system is so much better at navigating these big, monumental life choices, why is the gut feeling put on such a massive pedestal?
Well, we put the gut on a pedestal because it kept our species alive for 100,000 years. I mean, if you are foraging in the wilderness and you hear a twig snap, you do not want your slow thinking system to power up and begin calculating the statistical probability of a leopard being in the brush versus a harmless antelope.
Yeah, by the time you finish the math, your lunch.
Exactly. You want your fast system to instantly inject adrenaline into your bloodstream and force you to run. The gut is an incredible survival mechanism.
But the modern world is different.
Radically different. The modern world rarely presents us with choices that are about immediate physical survival. Today's choices are about long-term financial strategy, complex interpersonal dynamics, and abstract concepts of identity and fulfillment.
It's like your car's cruise control.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, if you are driving on a completely straight, empty, familiar highway in the middle of nowhere, the fast system, the cruise control, is fantastic. You don't have to consciously think about the pressure on the pedals, you just glide.
Right.
But the moment you encounter a sudden detour that forces you off the highway and onto a treacherous, winding, ice-covered mountain pass with a sheer drop on one side, leaving the cruise control on is a literal death sentence.
That is a perfect analogy.
You have to actively turn it off, grip the steering wheel with both hands, and manually, painstakingly drive the car. That manual override is the slow thinking system.
And when we leave the cruise control on during those complex life detours, when we let our fast system make modern career or relationship decisions, we fall into devastating cognitive traps. The documentation we are reviewing isolates several specific neurological pitfalls that completely paralyze the person standing at the crossroads.
Reading through these traps was a deeply uncomfortable experience for me, honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I immediately recognize my own behavior in every single one of them. The first one, the text highlight, is the concept of anchoring. And the way it manipulates us is terrifying.
Anchoring exposes the sheer gullibility of the fast-thinking system. It is our neurological tendency to fixate on the very first piece of information we receive about a topic, no matter how arbitrary or irrelevant, and use that as the absolute baseline for every subsequent judgment we make.
We drop an anchor in the sand and we cannot sail away from it.
Exactly.
The sources outline this incredibly revealing psychological experiment to prove this. Researchers brought a group of people into a room and had them spin a wheel of fortune.
Like a carnival game.
Yeah, it looked just like a roulette wheel, but the researchers had secretly rigged it so it would only ever land on two numbers, 10 or 65. The participants spin the wheel, get their random number, and then the researchers ask them a totally unrelated question.
What is your best guess for the percentage of African nations that hold membership in the United Nations?
Right. Notice the absolute disconnect there. A random number generated by a casino game, followed by a question requiring complex geopolitical knowledge. There is zero logical correlation.
None at all. But the results are staggering.
Mind-blowing. The participants whose rigged wheel landed on the number 10 guessed, on average, that 25% of African nations were in the UN.
Wow.
And the participants whose wheel landed on 65 guessed that 45% were in the UN. Their brains witnessed a completely meaningless number, subconsciously anchored to it, and then used that random number as the starting point to calculate a real-world estimate.
Now, strip away the roulette wheel and apply that exact same cognitive glitch to your life path. You are trying to figure out your worth in the job market or trying to decide what a, successful lifestyle looks like.
Right.
You hear a rumor about what a former classmate makes,
Mm.
or you scroll past an influencer's highly curated post about achieving a certain net worth by age 30. Your fast thinking system instantly drops an anchor on that completely arbitrary image or number.
Oh man, that is so true.
From that moment on, you judge your own entirely unique, complex life trajectory against a phantom metric that has absolutely nothing to do with your actual values, your local economy, or your personal circumstances. You are letting a rigged roulette wheel dictate your self-worth.
Which naturally leads to the feeling of always being behind, which then triggers the next massive cognitive trap, sunk cost bias.
Yes.
If anchoring is how we start off on the wrong foot, sunk cost bias is the chain that keeps us dragging that foot for decades.
Sunk cost bias is perhaps the most pervasive and destructive cognitive error in professional life. It is the irrational, agonizing compulsion to stick with a failing strategy, a miserable job, or a toxic environment simply because you have already invested time, money, or emotional energy into it.
It's so hard to let go.
Because your fast thinking system experiences profound neurological pain at the prospect of admitting a loss. It interprets changing course as admitting failure, and it will go to extraordinary lengths to avoid that feeling.
The example provided in the materials is almost painfully mundane, which is what makes it so universally recognizable. Imagine you go to a mid-tier restaurant.
Okay.
You order a dish that costs roughly $12. It arrives, you take 2 bites, and you realize it is genuinely awful. It is overcooked. It lacks flavor. It is just a really bad meal. Logically, you should stop eating.
But what does almost every human being do in that scenario?
We force ourselves to eat it. We choke down a terrible meal because we tell ourselves, I paid for it. I can't let it go to waste.
Which represents a complete failure of logic. The $12 is already gone. It is a sunk cost. Whether you eat the food or throw it in the trash, that money is never coming back to your bank account.
Right, it's just gone.
By forcing yourself to eat it, you do not magically refund your purchase. You simply compound the injury. You have now lost your money, and you have subjected yourself to a miserable culinary experience. You are paying twice.
Ouch.
To take that analogy a step further, think about the person who keeps pouring thousands of dollars into repairing a broken-down, unreliable car simply because they spent $1,000 fixing the transmission last month.
They are throwing good capital after bad.
Being entirely driven by the emotional refusal to accept that the initial investment is gone.
And when we scale that up to the person paralyzed at the career crossroads, the implications are tragic. This is the person who wakes up every day dreading their job, but they tell themselves, I spent 4 grueling years getting this highly specialized degree, and I've grinded at this corporate firm for 6 years.
I'd have a decade invested in this path.
Yeah. If I pivot now to do what I actually love, those 10 years were a complete waste. They are choking down the terrible $12 meal, but the meal is their entire life.
Your slow-thinking, analytical brain, if you forced it to engage, would look at that situation and recognize that those 10 years are gone. They belong to history. The universe does not care how much suffering you invested in the past.
Yeah.
It does not owe you a return on that suffering.
That is a brutal truth.
The only variable you have any control over is whether you are going to spend year 11 being equally miserable. Sunk cost bias chains you to a ghost.
And just when you think you can rationalize your way out of that, the text introduces a third evolutionary glitch that shuts us down completely.
Right, the combination of psychic numbing and proportional bias.
This is fundamentally about our brain's inability to comprehend scale.
Exactly. We mentioned earlier that the fast thinking system is entirely emotional and reactive. Because of that, it responds powerfully to a single, vivid, immediate narrative. If you see a stray dog shivering in the rain outside your window, your empathy receptors fire rapidly.
You want to go grab a towel and bring it inside.
You feel an intense, localized urge to go outside and help that specific dog. However, if I tell you that there are millions of stray dogs suffering globally, your brain literally cannot process the scale of that information.
The emotion doesn't multiply.
No, it flatlines. Your cognitive systems become overwhelmed by the sheer magnitude and abstract nature of the numbers, and you emotionally detach. That is psychic numbing.
Our neurological hardware evolved in small tribal groups. We are built to care about the immediate 20 or 30 people around us and the immediate threats facing our camp today. We simply do not have the evolutionary circuitry to feel urgency about massive, abstract, long-term data.
And this creates massive paralysis when making life choices. When you are asked to make a decision about a retirement account that will compound over 30 years, or when you are trying to execute a career transition that involves hundreds of complex steps, market analyses, and distant future projections, your fast system simply numbs out.
The scope is too large.
It cannot attach a vivid emotion to a 30-year projection. So, feeling overwhelmed and disconnected, your brain seeks immediate, low-effort comfort. You decide the problem is too big to solve today, and you open a streaming app to watch television instead.
So if we look at our listeners standing at this crossroads, the picture is incredibly daunting. Their biological hardware is actively working against them. They are anchoring to bad, arbitrary metrics.
They are punishing themselves by clinging to the sunk costs of their past.
And they are completely emotionally numbed out by the overwhelming scale of the future. It is no wonder they feel paralyzed.
Which brings us to the crucial pivot in our analysis. Because we know that the fast thinking system is constantly betraying us in these high-stakes moments, we cannot rely on instinct. We require a manual override.
We need a new system.
We need a rigid external cognitive architecture to force our brains out of the emotional fast lane and into the analytical slow lane.
The sources we are scrutinizing provide exactly that architecture. They lay out a highly systematic progression to regain intentional agency. It's a framework designed to break the paralysis, by breaking the decision-making process into isolated, manageable components. Let's explore how we actually execute this override.
It begins with interrogating the frame of the problem itself. When people feel trapped, it is almost always because they have artificially constrained their reality. They have built a tiny, windowless room around their problem and are staring at a single door. We call this a failure of decision architecture.
I see this constantly. Someone will come to me in a panic and say, I am so stressed I can't decide if I should quit my job or stay.
That is a binary frame.
Yes. It's a yes or no question, which instantly triggers the fast-thinking system's fight or flight response. You are effectively holding a gun to your own head, demanding an immediate choice between two extreme outcomes. It completely shuts down creative problem-solving.
The required move here is to fundamentally zoom out. You have to refuse the initial premise of the question. Instead of asking the binary question, should I quit? You shift to a broader architectural inquiry.
So you ask something like, what are the core elements I am actually trying to solve for?
Exactly. How do I design a daily routine that provides the financial stability I need while also accommodating my requirement for deep, uninterrupted creative work?
Well, that's so much better. Suddenly, you are no longer agonizing over a single exit door. You are looking at an expansive landscape of potential configurations. You have reframed the narrative from one of escape to one of design.
But to design anything effectively, you have to know what materials you actually care about, which leads to the next massive shift in this framework.
The texts aggressively attack a piece of advice that has been ingrained in us since middle school, the traditional pros and cons list.
Yes, the pros and cons list.
I have to admit, this challenged my own habits because whenever I'm stuck, the first thing I do is draw a line down the middle of a piece of paper.
The traditional pros and cons list is a relic. It is a tool that creates the illusion of analytical rigor while actually perpetuating cognitive bias. The fatal flaw of a standard pros and cons list is that it assumes a flat hierarchy of importance.
Right.
It assumes that every item you write down carries an equal statistical weight.
And that creates a wildly distorted picture of reality.
Exactly the opposite of clarity.
Yeah.
Let us map out a realistic scenario. You are evaluating a job offer. On the left side, the pro column, you write down, they have free catered lunches on Fridays, and the commute is 15 minutes shorter.
Okay, 2 pros.
On the right side, the con column, you write down, the direct manager has a reputation for being emotionally abusive and calling employees on weekends. If you were just tallying up the columns, you have 2 pros and 1 con. The math suggests you should take the job.
But the reality is that an emotionally abusive manager will absolutely destroy your mental health, ruin your personal relationships, and plunge you into burnout within 6 months. Meanwhile, a shorter commute is just a mild convenience, and you can buy your own sandwich on Friday. The list creates a completely false equivalence.
Therefore, we must elevate the discourse from simple lists to what the analysts call a weighted values matrix. Before you even look at the specific details of a job offer or a life change, you must rigorously clarify your overarching non-negotiable values.
So you ask yourself the big questions.
Are you currently optimizing for maximum aggressive wealth generation? Are you optimizing for geographical autonomy? Are you optimizing for maximum time with your young children? Once those values are explicitly defined, you assign them weight.
Got it.
You then evaluate every potential option not by how many random pros it has, but by how effectively it serves the specific, heavily weighted values you have established.
Which perfectly transitions into the next architectural move, which might be my favorite concept in this entire analysis. Shifting from option-focused thinking to value-focused thinking.
It's a game changer.
This is where we stop acting like passive consumers of our own lives.
Option-focused thinking is a reactive posture. It is walking into a restaurant, looking at a fixed menu, realizing you don't really like anything on it, but forcing yourself to order the least offensive dish anyway.
Ugh, I've been there.
In professional terms, it is looking at Job A and Job B, hating both of them, but agonizing over which one is slightly less terrible. You are accepting the false constraints presented to you by the environment.
And value-focused thinking flips that dynamic completely. It says, throw away the menu.
You start with the heavily weighted values you just defined. Let's say your matrix reveals that your absolute highest priorities are maintaining a stable baseline income to pay a mortgage, but also having the intellectual freedom to launch a tech startup.
Okay.
Option-focused thinking tells you that you must choose between staying in a soul-crushing corporate job to pay the mortgage or recklessly quitting to risk everything on the startup. Value-focused thinking demands that you invent option C.
You engineer a new reality. You approach your current employer and negotiate a transition to a 4-day work week, accepting a 20% pay cut. That covers the mortgage and buys you a dedicated, stress-free day every week to build your startup.
You didn't pick from the menu. You went into the kitchen and cooked your own meal. You bypassed the false constraints.
But inventing new options introduces a new vulnerability, doesn't it? When you step off the established path and start engineering your own options, you have to accurately predict what will happen next. You have to explore the consequences of pulling these new levers.
And this is where the analytical rigor must become incredibly sharp, because the modern landscape is flooded with noise, misinformation, and deeply biased advice.
This is a huge friction point. The texts talk about mapping out a consequence table to evaluate these invented options. But to fill out that table, I have to gather information. I have to talk to experts, read market trends, and listen to thought leaders. How do I actually scrutinize that information? How do I ensure my consequence table isn't just filled with other people's delusions? Because even the most decorated experts suffer from the exact same cognitive biases we just discussed.
Rigorous skepticism is mandatory here. When you are exploring consequences, you must treat every piece of external advice and data as a contaminated sample until proven otherwise. You must aggressively interrogate the source.
What's their angle?
Exactly. What is the economic incentive of the person telling you this industry is booming? Are they selling a course on how to enter that industry? Furthermore, you must look for the anchoring bias in experts themselves.
Oh, that's interesting.
Highly successful people frequently anchor to the specific macroeconomic conditions that existed when they succeeded 20 years ago, and they confidently assume the future will behave in the exact same way.
They assume the weather today will be the weather tomorrow. So mapping consequences isn't about finding a guaranteed prediction of the future. It's about stress testing your options against worst-case scenarios and asking, if this expert is wrong, if this trend collapses, can my baseline values still survive the fallout?
Exactly. And once you have mapped those realistic consequences, you enter the most psychologically grueling phase of the entire architecture. Weighing the trade-offs.
This is where it gets real.
This is where the theoretical exercise becomes intensely real, because you finally have to look at what you are going to lose.
And as we established, the human brain views loss as an existential threat. The documentation spends a significant amount of time unpacking the behavioral economics of this fear, specifically focusing on the endowment effect and the principle of loss aversion. I really want to linger on this because understanding this mechanism explains why so many incredibly smart people stay trapped in utterly mediocre lives.
To understand the sheer power of these forces, we have to look at the math of human emotion. Loss aversion dictates that the psychological devastation of losing something is roughly twice as intense as the psychological joy of gaining the exact same thing.
Twice as intense?
Yes. Winning $100 feels mildly good. Losing $100 feels like a profound injustice. Your brain is wired to defend what it already possesses with irrational ferocity.
The sources cite a fascinating classic experiment to demonstrate how quickly this irrationality takes hold. Researchers took a group of university students and randomly handed half of them a generic, university-branded coffee mug.
Just a cheap, everyday item.
Yeah, they gave the other half of the students nothing. Then they opened up a makeshift market. They asked the students who owned the mugs, what is the absolute minimum amount of money you would accept to sell your mug?
And they asked the students without mugs, what is the absolute maximum amount you would spend to buy one?
Now, the economic value of the mug is objective. It is a mass-produced item. Logically, the buying price and the selling price should be nearly identical.
But logic doesn't apply to the fast-thinking system.
No, it doesn't. The students who were randomly gifted the mugs demanded, on average, roughly 3 times more money to part with them than the buyers were willing to pay.
That is wild.
The physical composition of the mug did not change. It didn't suddenly become made of gold. The only thing that changed was the psychological concept of ownership. Because the mug was now theirs, because they were endowed with it, their brains artificially inflated its value to protect against the pain of losing it. That is the endowment effect in action.
Now, escalate that from a cheap coffee mug to a decade-long career, a geographic location, or a long-term relationship. You're standing at the crossroads weighing the trade-off of leaving your current situation to pursue one of those newly invented value-focused options.
Right.
Your current situation might be demonstrably terrible. You might be underpaid, unappreciated, and creatively starved. But because that situation is yours, because your brain feels ownership over that specific misery, You wildly overvalue it.
We literally hold our own futures hostage. We demand that the universe provide us with a guaranteed, risk-free, utopian vision of the future before we are willing to let go of a deeply flawed, agonizing present. We clutch the cheap mug while the house burns down around us.
Overcoming the endowment effect requires cold, calculated discipline. You have to force yourself to evaluate your current life as if you do not already own it.
Wow, that's hard.
If you were completely neutral, if you were dropped into your life today from a parallel universe, would you actively choose to buy into this specific job or this specific dynamic? If the answer is no, you must accept the pain of the trade-off and move forward.
Which brings us to the final, crucial component of this internal architecture. The requirement to stay constantly curious and treat the final choice not as a permanent tattoo, but as an ongoing hypothesis.
This is the ultimate antidote to the paralyzing fear of making the wrong choice. The anxiety of the crossroads comes from the false belief that decisions are permanent, unchangeable monuments.
But they're not.
They are not. A choice is simply the best possible hypothesis you can formulate based on the data you have today. You make the move, and then you shift into a state of active observation. You watch the feedback the reality gives you.
The major warning the texts give here is to guard against the narrative fallacy. We all want to be the hero of a cohesive, cinematic story. We make a massive career pivot, and we tell ourselves a beautiful story about how this is our ultimate calling.
But what happens if, 6 months later, the data shows we're miserable?
Exactly. We are working 80 hours a week, and our health is failing. The narrative fallacy is the dangerous tendency to ignore the brutal data of reality simply to protect the beautiful story we told our friends at dinner parties.
Staying curious means decoupling your ego from your initial hypothesis. It requires the humility to look at the incoming data and say, my hypothesis was incorrect, the environment shifted, my values evolved, and I need to adjust the trajectory. It is a continuous loop of framing, evaluating, choosing, and adjusting.
Okay, let us pause and take stock of where our listener is at this exact moment in the analysis. They started out completely frozen, but by meticulously applying this cognitive architecture, they have bypassed the evolutionary glitches of their fast-thinking brain.
They stopped anchoring to vanity metrics.
They neutralized the emotional pain of sunk costs and the endowment effect. They zoomed out to fix their decision frame, clarified their weighted values, invented new options, mapped the consequences with rigorous skepticism, and accepted the trade-offs. They have successfully mapped their internal landscape.
They have achieved internal clarity. But, and this is a massive structural pivot in our entire discussion, mapping a choice internally merely exposes a completely new external vulnerability.
What's that?
It reveals the boundaries of your own ignorance. You cannot analyze what you do not know.
Oh, right. If you only look inward, you are still trapped in the echo chamber of your own limited life experience. No matter how brilliant your internal architecture is, if you try to execute a massive life pivot entirely on your own, you are going to walk straight off a cliff you didn't even know was there.
Which is why the self-improvement journey must drastically evolve. It has to shift from a solitary internal psychological exercise into a highly strategic, external, collaborative campaign.
This is where we shift gears.
Yes, because the documentation we are reviewing goes to great lengths to dismantle and destroy one of the most pervasive and toxic mythologies in modern professional culture, the myth of the lone wolf genius.
The lone wolf narrative is an absolute cancer.
It really is.
It is this pervasive, romanticized idea that true elite success comes from isolating yourself, grinding 24 hours a day in silence, and fighting your way to the top of the mountain, armed only with your raw intelligence and sheer willpower. It makes for a great movie montage, but in reality, it is a guaranteed recipe for total burnout, emotional collapse, and eventual failure.
Intelligence operating in isolation rarely achieves breakthrough success. Usually just develops highly sophisticated forms of anxiety. To actually execute on the clarity you just fought so hard to achieve, you must adopt a fundamentally different paradigm. You must adopt an entrepreneurial mindset towards your own existence.
And I have to stop you right there because I know exactly where this is going, and we have to address the elephant in the room.
Okay, go for it.
Whenever I hear the phrase, build your personal board of directors, or treat yourself like a CEO, my eyes automatically roll into the back of my head.
I get it.
It sounds like the most hollow, buzzword-heavy corporate speak imaginable. It feels completely stripped of humanity.
That visceral reaction is entirely justified. The concept has been aggressively co-opted and cheapened by thousands of terrible networking seminars and superficial self-help gurus. It often sounds transactional and gross,
Totally.
but if we can temporarily strip away that cheap corporate varnish and look at the underlying structural truth, the necessity of the model is undeniable. Let's examine the mechanics of actual enterprise.
Okay, yeah.
You are the product. Your unique combination of skills, time, and energy is the asset.
Yeah.
Your current environment, whether that is your employer, your freelance clients, or the marketplace you are trying to enter, is the customer.
And the revenue.
The fulfillment, the financial security, and the autonomy you gain in return is the revenue. If you view yourself as the chief executive of that highly complex, lifelong enterprise, you quickly realize how absurd the lone wolf mentality is.
Right.
A competent CEO of a major organization does not sit alone in a dark office making every single product, marketing, and legal decision in total isolation. It would be corporate suicide.
What do? They acknowledge their massive blind spots. They recognize that they cannot be an expert in supply chain logistics, international tax law, and consumer psychology simultaneously. So they construct a boardroom.
Yes.
They surround themselves with highly specialized, diverse minds who possess the specific expertise the CEO lacks. They build a machine designed to see around corners they cannot see themselves.
And yet, when it comes to managing the single most important enterprise in the world, our own lives and careers, we foolishly believe we should just guess our way through the dark. We need to construct our own boardroom. But before we invite anyone into that room, we have to fundamentally understand what kind of enterprise we're actually running.
This flips traditional old-school career advice completely upside down. The traditional playbook tells you to study the corporate mold and then violently contort your own soul to fit inside it.
Learn to play the game.
Yeah, dress for the job you want, which is usually code for erasing your individuality and mimicking the dominant culture. But the entrepreneurial mindset demands the exact opposite. It demands that you unapologetically map what the sources refer to as your superhero origin story.
The terminology is playful, but the exercise is brutally serious. Your superhero origin story is a highly precise, unvarnished audit of your authentic professional identity.
How so?
It requires you to look at the values matrix you built earlier and translate that into operational reality. What is your actual biological work rhythm? Are you a morning sprinter who gets everything done before noon, or do you require late-night, uninterrupted deep work to function?
Good questions.
How do you process conflict? Do you require highly structured, hierarchical environments to feel safe, or do you thrive in chaotic, ambiguous startup cultures?
You have to figure out exactly who you are and what kind of machine you are running before you ask anyone for directions on how to drive it. There is a brilliant, striking analogy in the source material about this. They describe the danger of becoming a corporate racehorse. Oh, I love this part. Imagine you are a thoroughbred. You are wearing blinders, and you are sprinting down a dirt track at breakneck speed. You are sweating, your heart is pounding, and you are giving it absolutely everything you have, simply because someone opened the starting gate and fired a pistol.
But you have absolutely no idea who entered you in this specific race.
Exactly. You don't know where the finish line is, you don't know what the prize is, and most tragically, you haven't even paused to ask yourself if you actually like running in circles in the mud.
You are exerting maximum effort in service of a goal you never actively chose. To build an effective boardroom, you must step off the track. You must take off the blinders, use the internal architecture to figure out your origin story, and then, and only then, do you look outward to find specific advisors who align with your authentic operational style, rather than advisors who just want to train you to be a faster racehorse.
Which brings us to the actual assembly of the boardroom, because once you know your origin story and your blind spots, you can begin the strategic recruitment of your network. And the analysis is incredibly sharp on this point. You must abandon the search for the singular Yoda.
The Yoda model of mentorship is a dangerous fantasy. It is the belief that there is one magical, all-knowing sage out there who possesses the perfect answers for your career, your finances, your spiritual life, and your personal relationships.
It's just not realistic.
No, searching for this omniscient guru is not only a waste of time, but it places an impossible, crushing burden on a single human relationship. No one person can be your everything.
Instead, you need a hyper-specialized network. You need a crew. Think of it like assembling the team for an elaborate high-stakes heist movie or outfitting a massive multi-year expedition to the Arctic. You don't want to hire 7 navigators. The ship will sink the moment the engine breaks.
Right.
You need the hacker, the getaway driver, the demolitions expert, the inside person, and the strategist. Everyone has a highly defined specific mandate.
If we synthesize the sociological research on high-performing networks, we can categorize this required boardroom into 7 distinct necessary archetypes.
The 7 chairs?
Yes, 7 chairs. Each advisor provides a unique, irreplaceable form of capital. However, and this is crucial, every single one of these archetypes also carries a specific inherent bias or drawback that you, as the CEO, must carefully manage and counterbalance.
Let's pull up the chairs and look at who needs to be sitting in this boardroom. I want to build a deeply realistic scenario for each of these so we can see how they actually function in the wild. First, we have the company insider. This is the person deeply embedded inside the walls of your current specific environment. Why are they the first chair you need to fill?
Because organizations operate on 2 entirely different sets of rules. There's the official employee handbook, which outlines how things are supposed to work.
Yeah.
And then there's the invisible, unwritten political architecture, which dictates how things actually work.
The shadow structure.
Exactly. The company insider is the person who understands the invisible architecture. They know which vice president actually holds the budget power, regardless of what the organizational chart says.
They know where the bodies are buried.
They know the historical landmines. They can tell you, do not pitch that specific software solution because the CEO lost $1 million on a similar project 5 years ago and will instantly hate you for bringing it up.
They know exactly who needs to be copied on the email to make a project move and whose ego needs to be stroked in the hallway. They are absolutely critical for your immediate day-to-day survival and your near-term promotional velocity.
Absolutely.
If you don't have an insider, you will inevitably step on a political landmine on day one and blow up your career without ever understanding why. But what is the danger of relying too heavily on the insider?
Their vision is fundamentally restricted by the walls of the building you were both standing in. Their advice is almost always heavily biased toward keeping you within that specific environment, navigating those specific politics.
They want you to stay.
Yes. They view your success strictly through the lens of ascension within the current company. If your internal values matrix indicates that you actually need to leave the industry entirely to find fulfillment, the insider cannot help you. In fact, they might actively discourage you from leaving because your departure threatens their own network. You have to counterbalance their micro view with external perspectives.
Which perfectly sets up the second chair, the Skillmaster. This is a very different type of relationship.
Entirely different. The relationship with the Skillmaster is beautifully simple, highly tactical, and completely devoid of emotional entanglement. This person is the artisan. They are the sensei in the dojo.
I love that.
Their sole mandate is to ruthlessly elevate your specific technical craft.
Let's say you are transitioning into deep tech software engineering. Your company insider is helping you navigate the chaotic engineering department politics. Your Skillmaster doesn't care about the department politics.
Not at all.
They don't care about your 5-year life plan, your marital status, or your profound search for meaning. They only care that your code is sloppy and inefficient. They sit down with you, rip your architecture apart line by line, and show you how to rebuild it with elegance and precision.
Exactly. They exist to make you undeniably excellent at the functional mechanism of your job. The friction point here is that they can be harsh. You have to check your ego at the door because their feedback is purely critical and focused on the work, not your feelings.
Okay, so you have the insider protecting your flanks politically and the Skillmaster sharpening your weapon. But neither of those things guarantee you will actually capture any value from your hard work. This brings us to the third and frankly the most frequently ignored chair in the boardroom, the money-minded mentor.
The omission of this advisor is a massive vulnerability, particularly for people who view their work as a passion or a calling.
We get so weird about money.
We are culturally conditioned to feel intense discomfort when discussing money. We get emotional, we feel greedy, and we dramatically underprice our own value, especially during high-stakes negotiations. The money mentor is the cold, calculated financial modeler.
I love this archetype. This is the person you call the night before you walk into a salary negotiation or a pitch for equity. You are terrified, you are sweating, and you are thinking about accepting the first lowball offer just to end the uncomfortable conversation.
We've all been there.
You call your money mentor and they look at the market data, they look at your skill set, and they say, you are operating from a place of emotional scarcity. The market rate for this role is 40% higher than what you are asking. Do not accept anything less than this specific number and ask for these specific stock options. They act as a firewall against your own financial insecurities.
They treat money not as a reflection of personal worth, but simply as a mechanical tool necessary to construct the lifestyle you mapped out in your values matrix. They are essential for ensuring that your professional exertion actually translates into tangible, protective wealth.
So we have politics, craft, and capital secured. Now we need to look at the horizon. The fourth chair belongs to the industry mentor. How does the radar of the industry mentor differ from the localized knowledge of the company insider?
If the insider is looking through a microscope at the bacteria on your desk, the industry mentor is looking through a telescope at the tectonic plates of the global economy. They operate high above your immediate bubble. Their value is macro-level pattern recognition.
So while your insider is helping you win a promotion at a company that makes DVD players, your industry mentor is the one who taps you on the shoulder and says, hey, I'm seeing massive capital flowing into streaming technology. This entire hardware sector is going to be obsolete in 36 months. Stop fighting for the promotion and start learning cloud architecture.
Precisely. They prevent you from becoming the most successful person on a sinking ship. They help you avert disruption by tracking the metatrends that haven't hit your local environment yet.
Which naturally requires massive visibility across different sectors, bringing us to the fifth chair, the network mentor, or the superconnector.
The superconnector operates on a completely different frequency. They might not possess the deep, tactical coding skills of your Skillmaster, and they might not have the macroeconomic theories of your industry mentor. Their genius is entirely relational.
They know everybody.
They are the architects of human ecosystems. They know everyone, and more importantly, everyone is happy to hear from them.
What they actually teach you is the system of connection, because trying to maintain a massive network usually leads to extreme extrovert burnout.
Right, it's exhausting.
The superconnector shows you how to curate relationships, how to offer value to people before asking for anything in return, and how to maintain thousands of weak ties authentically without exhausting your daily energy reserves. When you encounter a problem you can't solve, you don't ask the superconnector for the answer, you ask them for the introduction to the person who has the answer.
And occasionally you need an introduction to a room where the door is heavily guarded. This is why the sixth chair is perhaps the most critical for systemic breakthrough, the influential ally.
This one requires a deep understanding of power dynamics. The influential ally isn't just giving you advice over coffee, they are deploying active capital on your behalf.
The sources make a vital distinction here. Mentors talk to you. Allies talk about you, specifically when you are not in the room.
That's a huge difference.
It is. The influential ally possesses accumulated capital, whether that is immense social standing, intense political leverage, or massive financial resources. And they are willing to spend a portion of that capital to advocate for your advancement.
This is particularly crucial when we look at the reality of systemic biases in the professional world. If a listener is facing impenetrable barriers due to their race, their gender, their socioeconomic background, or their lack of pedigree, all the good advice in the world won't magically dismantle those institutional walls.
Exactly.
The influential ally is the person who is already inside the fortress. They hold the keys to the gate. They use their inherent privilege to lower the drawbridge. They force your resume to the top of the pile. They demand that you be included in the high-stakes strategy meeting. They don't just guide you, they physically alter the landscape to grant you access.
And because the stakes of that relationship are so high and the power dynamic is so skewed, it can often feel intimidating, which is exactly why the final chair in the boardroom exists to ground you, the peer mentor.
I have to admit, when I first read about the peer mentor, it felt counterintuitive. We are conditioned to think that mentors must be these grizzled veterans with 30 years of experience in a corner office. Aren't peers essentially your competition? Why would you put a peer on your board of directors?
Because the landscape of work and life changes with violent speed. The CEO with 30 years of experience might be an incredible industry mentor, but if you ask them for advice on how to navigate a highly specific, modern, entry-level digital interview process, their advice will be useless.
They haven't interviewed for a job since 1995.
Exactly. They have no idea what the current trench warfare actually feels like.
So the peer mentor is the trench mate, They're only one or two steps ahead of you, or perhaps walking shoulder to shoulder with you in a parallel industry.
Exactly. What the peer mentor provides is immense, immediate, highly relatable empathy. They provide the real-time survival tactics. When you suffer a devastating rejection, the billionaire CEO might offer a philosophical platitude about perseverance.
Right.
But the peer mentor says, I got that exact same rejection letter last Tuesday. It hurts. Here is the specific email template I used to pivot to the next opportunity. They validate your daily reality in a way the senior advisors simply cannot.
So we step back and look at this constructed architecture. You have the insider guarding your local politics, the skill master forging your craft, the money mentor protecting your financial architecture, the industry mentor scanning the horizon for disruption, the super connector weaving your web, the influential ally kicking down the locked doors, and the peer mentor keeping you sane in the trenches.
It is a profoundly robust, bulletproof machine for navigating a complex life.
But this brings us to the hardest part of the entire analysis tactical execution. Because identifying the 7 archetypes on a whiteboard is an easy intellectual exercise. But actually going out into the world and convincing these busy, successful, highly guarded human beings to spend their valuable time helping you without making it feel incredibly awkward, desperate, or transactional, that is a massive behavioral challenge.
It is the point where most people freeze, because they approach the process with the wrong psychological framework. The materials provide a profound semantic shift here. They argue that we must completely rewire our approach. We must treat the building of this network as an exploration, not a hunt.
And the distinction between those two words changes the entire chemical makeup of the interaction. Let's unpack the hunt.
A hunt is driven by a scarcity mindset. It implies desperation. If you are hunting for a mentor, you believe there is only one rare, perfect target out there, and you must capture them.
It's aggressive.
When you operate from a hunting mindset, your interactions become tense, predatory, and highly transactional. You walk up to a senior executive at a conference, and even if you are trying to be polite, your underlying energy is screaming, "What can I extract from you? Will you solve my life for me?"
And highly successful people possess an incredibly sensitive radar for that kind of desperation. They can smell it from across the room, and their immediate instinct is to protect their time and their energy. They will politely hand you a business card and run for the exit.
Which is why the exploration mindset is so revolutionary. Exploration completely removes the pressure of the immediate kill. When you are exploring, you are simply wandering through the vast professional landscape with an open map, genuinely curious about the diverse wildlife out there.
Just observing.
You are not trying to capture anyone. You are just observing and initiating low-stakes conversations. If a connection doesn't ignite, it is not a catastrophic failure of the hunt. It is simply a path that didn't lead to a destination. You shrug, maintain your confidence, and keep exploring.
And when you are in this relaxed, exploratory state, the sources provide a highly specific tool for initiating contact. They introduce the concept of the elevator overview, and they are very careful to explicitly state that it should absolutely not be an elevator pitch.
The word pitch implies a sale transaction. It implies that at the end of the 30 seconds, you are expecting the other person to sign a contract, hand over a check, or formally agree to be your lifelong mentor. It creates immediate defensive pressure.
An elevator overview is completely different.
It is. It is a highly distilled, 30-second, authentic narrative of who you are, what specific values you are currently optimizing for, which you know intimately because you completed the internal cognitive architecture we discussed earlier, and what specific intellectual friction you are currently trying to resolve.
It sounds something like this. Hi, my background is in traditional supply chain logistics, but I'm currently intensely fascinated by how mid-sized companies are trying to integrate sustainable, biodegradable packaging without destroying their profit margins. I'm just spending my time right now trying to learn how different leaders are balancing that math, period, full stop.
Notice what is missing from that overview. There is no desperate ask.
None at all.
There is no, will you be my industry mentor and meet with me every Tuesday? It is simply an authentic declaration of curiosity, cast out into the room like a fishing line, giving the other person a completely pressure-free opportunity to either engage with the intellectual puzzle or politely nod and walk away.
And the crucial strategic element is where you choose to deliver this overview. You cannot just stand on a street corner. You have to identify and infiltrate what the documentation calls watering holes.
I love this biological metaphor. If you want to observe a specific type of animal, you don't wander randomly through the entire jungle. You find the specific watering hole where that animal naturally gathers at dusk to drink.
Exactly. You must identify the natural habitats of your target advisors. Where do the thought leaders in sustainable packaging go when they aren't working? What obscure digital forums do they debate in? Which hyper niche 50-person weekend conferences do they attend to relax and talk shop?
You do not try to forcibly drag these busy executives into your world for a formal, stiff coffee meeting.
No.
You go to their watering holes where their guard is already down, where they are already relaxed and engaged in their passions, and you casually insert your elevator overview into the flowing current of their existing conversation.
And while you are navigating these watering holes, the texts offer a massive, glaring warning about assumptions. You have to remain incredibly open-minded about who actually holds the knowledge, which brings us full circle back to the cognitive biases we discussed in the very beginning, specifically the representativeness
Well,
bias.
this is a great point.
There is an anecdote in the text that perfectly captures the danger of letting our fast-thinking brains make assumptions while networking. I want to build out this scene because it is so incredibly common.
It perfectly illustrates how our ingrained stereotypes can actively sabotage our exploration.
Imagine a young, highly ambitious professional who has spent weeks trying to secure a brief informational meeting with the elusive CEO of a major innovative startup. She finally gets a 15-minute slot at a local coffee shop. She walks into the cafe, nervous, clutching her notebook. She scans the room and sees a table with two people sitting at it.
Okay, setting the scene.
One is a man, slightly older, wearing a razor-sharp, custom-tailored navy suit, looking intensely at a laptop, projecting pure corporate authority. Sitting across from him is a younger woman wearing a faded vintage band t-shirt, ripped jeans, and looking casually at her phone.
And we all know what happens next.
Driven entirely by her fast-thinking pattern recognition system, the young professional walks straight past the woman in the t-shirt, extends her hand to the man in the suit, and says, "It is such an honor to finally meet you. I have followed your career as CEO for years."
She allowed the superficial aesthetic of the suit to serve as a proxy for power and knowledge. She anchored to a cinematic stereotype of what a CEO is supposed to look like.
Exactly. And the crushing reality of the scene is that the man in the beautiful suit was simply the executive assistant. The woman in the faded band t-shirt, who she completely ignored and disrespected, was the genius CEO who built the company from the ground up.
Ouch.
The young professional let her representativeness bias make a snap, lazy judgment, and in doing so, she instantly alienated the influential ally she had worked so hard to meet before the conversation even began.
It is a profound reminder that the most valuable capital in a room rarely looks the way Hollywood or traditional corporate culture has conditioned us to expect. When you are exploring the watering holes, you must forcefully suppress your fast-thinking assumptions.
You can't judge a book by its cover.
You have to treat every single person in the room, the intern, the quiet person in the corner, the casually dressed observer, with the exact same level of profound curiosity and respect, because you have no idea who holds the missing piece of your specific puzzle.
I want to push this entire framework into one final uncomfortable area. Let's assume the listener does everything right. They conquer their biases, they map their values, they explore the watering holes, and they successfully assemble this incredible 7-chair board of directors. The machine is running perfectly.
Okay.
But time passes. 5 years go by. The listener scales up, their life changes, their values shift. What happens when you inevitably outgrow the advice of the people who helped build you? We carry so much intense guilt about this. It feels like betrayal to stop calling a mentor.
This is perhaps the most emotionally mature concept in the entire analysis, understanding the natural biological life cycle of these relationships. We cling to mentors long after the utility has expired because of the exact same sunk cost bias and endowment effect we discussed regarding our careers.
You feel we owe them our perpetual presence.
But the documentation vigorously normalizes the concept of strategic restructuring. Look at the life cycle of a successful startup. The chaotic, risk-tolerant, brilliantly manic team that takes a company from $0 to $10 million in revenue is almost never the exact same, highly structured, process-driven team required to scale that company from $10 million to $1 billion.
That makes total sense.
The enterprise outgrows the original team. It is not a failure. It is the definition of success. The CEO must restructure the boardroom for the next phase of warfare.
It is an evolution, not a betrayal.
Precisely. When you realize that an insider's advice is keeping you too safe, or a Skillmaster's techniques are no longer relevant to your new management role, it is healthy and necessary to respectfully retire the act of mentorship. You invite them to dinner, you explicitly acknowledge the immense specific value they provided during that critical season of your life, you express profound gratitude, and then you intentionally allow the dynamic to soften.
It transitions from an intense, active mentorship into a warm, casual, professional friendship.
You clear the chair.
You clear the chair, which creates the required oxygen and space for you to venture back out into the watering holes and recruit the new advisor who possesses the specific map for the new territory you are about to enter.
Exactly.
So we step all the way back. Let's look at the totality of what we have uncovered today. We return to the protagonist of this entire analysis, to you, the listener, standing frozen at the massive crossroads of your life. Think about the sheer scale of the transformation that occurs when you apply these dual frameworks.
Massive.
You are no longer a victim of your own prehistoric neurobiology. By meticulously engaging the slow-thinking cognitive architecture, you have neutralized the invisible forces that were paralyzing you. You are no longer allowing random roulette wheels to dictate your worth through anchoring.
You have ruthlessly cut the emotional anchor of the sunk cost bias.
You have bypassed the psychic numbing by breaking your massive future down into weighted values, newly invented options, and rigorously tested consequences. You have conquered the internal battlefield.
You reclaimed your internal agency from the chaos of emotion.
And then, by adopting the cold, strategic clarity, the CEO mindset, you destroyed the toxic myth of the lone wolf. You replaced the profound isolation of the crossroads with a dynamic, highly curated, 7-part ecosystem of human capital.
You're no longer wandering blindly through the corporate jungle, hoping to stumble upon a magical guru.
You are an explorer, navigating watering holes with your authentic origin story, building an unstoppable alliance of insiders, masters, mentors, connectors, allies, and peers.
You have taken the raw, terrifying, paralyzing energy of absolute confusion, and you have systematically transmuted it into the ultimate exercise of structural agency.
And as we synthesize these documents, a much broader, almost philosophical reflection emerges about the nature of success itself. The prevailing cultural narrative tells us that human potential is unlocked entirely through internal grit. Just be smarter, work harder, sleep less, and endure more pain than the next person.
But the architecture we have examined proves that raw intelligence, operating in a vacuum, is structurally fragile.
It shatters under pressure. True, durable human potential is actually unlocked at a very specific intersection. It is the exact intersection of relentless, rigorous internal self-awareness and expansive, strategic external community.
You must know the deep mechanics of your own mind, your biases, your false constraints, your true values, and then you must aggressively connect that highly optimized self to a specialized network of diverse minds that can elevate you beyond your own biological limits.
It is the perfect synthesis of the internal and the external. Which brings us to our final thought for today. I want to leave you with a deeply uncomfortable, highly provocative question to carry with you as you navigate the rest of your week.
I love this question.
I want you to visualize your life right now, today, as a literal boardroom. There is a long mahogany table, and there are 7 chairs around it. Every single day, choices are being made at that table about your future, your financial security, your time, and your emotional energy. Decisions are being ratified. If you have not consciously, strategically, and ruthlessly recruited the specific human beings we discussed today to fill those seats, who is currently sitting in your boardroom?
That is a terrifying audit to conduct if you are truly honest with yourself.
Look closely at the faces around the table. Are those vital chairs currently occupied by outdated societal expectations you inherited from your parents? Are they filled by the loudest, most toxic voices in your social media feed?
Are they occupied by an abusive boss whose validation you are irrationally desperate for?
Or, worst of all, are the chairs simply filled by your own unexamined cognitive biases, your deep-seated fears, your crippling sunk costs, and the panicked, lazy reactions of your fast-thinking brain? If you are the chief executive officer of your own existence, you cannot let ghosts and algorithms run your company. It is time to call an emergency meeting. It is time to audit your board, permanently evict the voices that are starving your potential, and walk out into the world to find the crew that will actually help you build the empire you deserve.